a few decades ago, you got your PhD in AI.
27 years ago.
What
But
was
thanks, you want to like give me a paper cut and rub lemon juice in it?
No, okay. So what was the premise of the thesis, and did any of it turn out true, or was it wrong?
It was right after a fashion. So the thing that obsessed me when I was entering graduate school was, at the time, machine learning was all function approximation. And it was obvious to me that what we really wanted was to hill climb in the space of Turing-complete systems. We wanted to have complete programs that we could learn and make better. And the reason that nobody did that is because there's something called the halting problem. You can prove that no matter how small a change you make to a computer program that's Turing-complete, that has even the possibility of doing anything a computer can do, you might teleport to any other part of functional space of what the computer actually outputs. And so, in principle, you can't hill climb. And I said, well, just because it's impossible in principle doesn't mean it's impossible in practice. And I spent 5 years demonstrating that you could hill climb in the space of actual full programs and not just functions. And it's taken the world a lot of time to get there, but we are now more and more at that place. Not in the way that I technically did it, but I think that it was directionally correct.
Okay, so I wanted to just establish he's a nerd, he knows computer science, and he's been at this a while. Now, this is something that you may not know, but you may find interesting. Was Tom Cruise going to star in a science fiction movie that you wrote, and why didn't that happen? Was it because it was too science fiction, or was it because of Tom Cruise?
Tom Cruise. Cruise Wagner Productions came to me with a film that was a star vehicle for Tom Cruise. They asked if I would help fix it up. I read it. I told them sometimes it's better to just start over, and this is one of those times. Then in retrospect, I'm really embarrassed. I kind of lectured them a little bit about the difference between Darth Maul and Darth Vader and why Darth Maul isn't interesting to us and Darth Vader is. And then I felt really embarrassed because these were people in the movie business. And so then they said, well, what would you do, smarty pants? And I felt sort of obligated to do that. So I wrote out a few ideas. They said, oh, we'll take number 4. And I was like, great, it's yours. But the more I refused to write the film for them, the more they offered to prepay for a film I hadn't even written, till the number got so big, I was like, okay. So I was the CEO of a tech company at the time, but I wrote this film for them. And then, weeks after they bought it, Tom Cruise did his jumping on the couch thing with Oprah Winfrey and left Paramount, and so it's gathering dust somewhere in Paramount.
Give us a thumbnail sketch. What was the story, premise? Is it relevant to AI?
Weirdly, yes. Imagine, so I was trying to describe to them the difference between Darth Maul.
Imagination, that's a derived word from...
Exactly, exactly. I was saying Darth Maul isn't interesting because he doesn't have motivations. He's not a character, he's two-dimensional. Darth Vader has motivations, so we're interested in what his motivations are. So I imagine this crazy future where you had sort of a chat bot that you could talk to, and it was out in beta, and it really wanted to excite its beta users so that they started paying like $20 a month for it. And the more that the character, the Tom Cruise character, wasn't interested, the more it started to create problems in this person's life so that it could fix those problems. And you can imagine how that might escalate in a Tom Cruise film.
All right, got it. All right, so I'm painting a picture. This guy's not typical. Okay, what's the boldest moonshot idea that you killed at X, Moonshot Factory? What was your logic and any regrets? Now, we're going to explore the Moonshot Factory because I think it's very relevant. The Moonshot Factory is something that this guy created and leads, and it's you know, we're in this very special company that has resources and has made that a priority. It's like a new kind of R&D for our generation. But I actually think what you have built, the DNA of what you have built, has as AI shortens, you know, short circuits idea to actuality. What you built could help countries, could help other corporates, could help nonprofits, could help society at a time when we're looking backwards and not always forward. So I actually think what we're going to hear from him the next few minutes could have real implications on many different levels. But yeah, so my first question to you is...
So I'm going to give you 2 examples. Thank you for the kind words. To be clear, we don't want to hog moonshots to ourselves. Humanity has more problems than X is going to solve, for sure. So we all need to be taking moonshots, and that's why we created the podcast, which you just saw the trailer for. The first season is out. The second season will come out in about 2 months. And that's us trying to share some of the trials and tribulations and experiences and learnings we've had so you all can go do moonshots too. To give you 2 really quick answers, there's so many that come to mind, but I'll pick the first 2 that came into my head. We had something about 5 times the size of this space, which was taking seawater and turning it into methanol, which you could burn in a gas tank. There are 4 billion internal combustion engines in the world that have already been paid for, and once they've been paid for, it's a sunk cost. People are going to amortize those things down. So finding a carbon negative way to make something you can burn in the gas tank, then even when the CO2 goes back up into the air, the whole process is carbon neutral. And so we had the first drips coming out of this machine, literally carbon negative, turning seawater into methanol. People were crying. But we couldn't convince ourselves after a few years that we were going to get it cheaper than about $15 a gallon of gas equivalent. And that's not going to change the world. We had pre-agreed with ourselves that $5 was our kill criteria. And after a few years, we couldn't convince ourselves we were going to get to $5, so we killed the project. Another one, which we announced having killed quite recently, we worked on a fusion project for almost 5 years. We did almost 1,000 fusion shots in Alameda, just up a bit north of here. There was a 1% chance this would have turned out to be the right way to solve things. But what we really liked about it was really cheap to ask and answer the question, and all of the risk was physics risk, not engineering risk. So if it had happened to be right, then it would have been wildly cheaper to make scaled up systems, and so the techno-economics would have been very friendly. It turned out to be wrong after we got the data. I mean, was it possibly still right? Yes. But the data was telling us that our chances had gone down from maybe a 1% chance of success to a 0.1% chance of success. And that's what we do. We kill things when they're going in the wrong direction. So we stop that and we'll go on to the next moonshot.
If you had unlimited resources, what moonshot idea would you like to see the planet pursue outside of Alphabet, and who would you put on a all-star dream team to pursue it? Dead or alive?
I'd have to think longer about the all-star dream team. But first, can I start with the more important it is, the more disastrous it would be to bring unlimited resources to a project. We purposefully, seriously under-resource.
That's really profound. Can you say that again? Like,
the more important it is to succeed, the more disastrous unlimited resources are to solving a project. We purposefully under-resource, really dramatically under-resource, the things that we're doing at X. And the reason that we do that is we are only interested in phase transitions. If you have an idea to make something 10% better, cool, go do it. But that's probably going to be really hard in whatever field you're trying to do that in, because a lot of smart people before you have already worked on this. We are only interested in things that are 10 times better. And that is not a smartness competition, and it's not a spending competition. It's a bravery and a creativity competition. And bravery and creativity go away when you pour too much money on something. So the first thing I would do is not apply infinite resources to it. But my answer to your question is that moonshot we have tried the most times to find, and so far never found, is one in education. And it makes me really sad because I think it is the sort of core bedrock of society. If you don't have education, you can't have an educated electorate. And if you don't have an educated electorate, then democracy doesn't work. And if democracy doesn't work, nothing works. So education is the one that I would go after.
Okay. You've been leading innovation for so many years in the Valley. I know you're a Stanford grad, CMU, you came back, grew up in England a little bit. What's your view of much of the innovation coming out of the Valley today? That's Silicon Valley. because some of you have valleys, other places. I don't want to be disrespectful. Do you think it's more exciting than when you started, or more incremental? Where do you look to see the most exciting innovation come from around the world?
Well, unquestionably, now is a very exciting time. Technology has been on an exponential ramp for thousands of years for humanity. And truth be told, it's probably always been about the same shape of the curve. It's just the nature of an exponential that if you look at the last 10% of any exponential curve, it looks like all the change happened in the last 10%. But hold on to your seats, because the next 10% is going to make even the 10% we're in right now look like we were standing still. So for sure, foundation models are an important part of it. I think foundation models are not the only important part of it. I would also say that when we talk to people a lot about, hey, do you want to come work at the Moonshot Factory? There's an interesting tension. And the way I would say is, if you want to be working at the white-hot epicenter of today's technology, for sure, spend time on that, and some really great things are going to come from it. The thing we spend our time on is trying to make the next thing that will be white hot in 10 to 15 years. It's very different work. It's harder work, and it's frankly lonelier work. But I find it really exciting, and the dreamer and the explorer in me doesn't want to be in the white hot epicenter. I want to be out where nobody is, looking at the thing that still looks kind of crazy. So I think there's a trade-off. There's a lot to be done with today's technologies, but there's also a lot to be discovered about tomorrow's.
Okay, we are focused on AI today, Imagination in Action AI Summit. What do you think the public least understands about AI? Do you view it as a moonshot or a whole portfolio of moonshots? What are the opportunities that most excite you from AI? What are the risks that most concern you about AI? Lower the moon in something. This is a multi-part question. Lower the moon is something that this guy created, at least this very special company. The Moonshot is a very special company. Actually, let me just stop there. Take those.
Just those? Okay, if you're sure. I mean, first of all, the sort of intensity of the time that we're in certainly didn't just come from X, but as you saw Jeff Dean and Andrew Ng speaking on the Moonshot podcast, because Google Brain was actually started at X, we have some excitement and affection for what's going on in the foundation model space, what often was called deep learning until fairly recently. Many of you may know it as LLMs. I guess this is a pretty AI-friendly crowd. The second thing is, it drives me crazy, having been in artificial intelligence for a long time. Artificial intelligence is a much bigger and more complex field than, everyone who thinks that artificial intelligence started about 4 or 5 years ago. It didn't. It's 70 years old.
And 1955, John McCarthy, who came to Stanford, and Minsky coined the term to get funding to do a retreat in Dartmouth. And it was really cybernetics before that. But AI was founded, the term, in 80.
Yeah, I feel like you have to put Alan Newell and Herb Simon in that list. The four of them are who I would say.
Turing, too, yeah.
So, artificial intelligence and the current moment with sort of transformers and foundation models, not identical. The second is a small subset of the first, even if it's right now the thing that's working the best. And I would remind everyone, the neural networks which underpin how foundation models work today were out of vogue for decades. So these things kind of go in cycles, and I would not say we're done and now it's just let's make some applications. I think artificial intelligence has plenty more to learn and discover in the sort of raw materials. The next one is, it drives me crazy that we talk about intelligence when it comes to artificial intelligence as though it's a monolithic thing relative to humans. But when we talk about almost anything else using language, we say birds fly, balloons fly, 747s fly, dragonflies fly, but we mean incredibly different things when we say the word fly about those different things. Intelligence is not a unidimensional thing, and I wish that as a society we were having a more nuanced conversation about the different dimensions of intelligence. And the last one is, While the situation that we're currently in is very exciting, I suspect in the long run that most of the things that artificial intelligence will do to change our lives, we haven't imagined yet. And I'm saying that for the very specific reason that every previous technology in the history of humanity has had the following characteristic. People over-expected it to change their lives in the short term and underappreciated how much it would change the world in the long run. I see no reason to believe that this technology won't be the same.
What do you know that no one in this room knows?
Is that like a two nights logic puzzle kind of thing? I mean, if I tell you, then that's no longer
I
true.
know, but you know stuff that, like, people aren't thinking about, like, I don't know.
Okay, I will tell you something that is not technically a secret, but I'm not sure that people appreciate it. I get to be particularly close to and excited about some of the progeny from X, like Waymo, which you saw, and Waymo is very much having its day in the sun. So most of you have sort of dialed in like, oh, wow, that's real now. We've been working on that for 15 years, and I'm glad that we're there. What really excites me is Wing, the drones for package delivery, is maybe only 12 months behind them. And so I believe over the next 12, maybe it'll take 18 or 24 months, we will all take as for granted what Wing is doing with delivering things as we today take for granted what Waymo has done in the people delivery space. And so seeing that reality before the rest of you have gotten that excited about it and knowing that you will all be that excited 12, 18 months from now, that's an example for you.
I do think white-collar jobs are going to change. And we saw blue-collar jobs change in this country. How do you think white-collar jobs are going to be defined for the next generation? And how are we going to coexist with technology that we may not fully appreciate? And as someone who kind of thinks about these things, what insight do you have?
I mean, we're all guessing, including me. Let's start with that. But the history of automation, and I don't just mean the last 10 or 20 years, I mean the last like several hundred years at least, the printing press is an automation of kind. The history of automation says that jobs change and that the people who invest in that change and participate in that change learn to harness and surf that change, do great. People who resist that change tend to do less great. I think as society, we have historically done a really, really bad job of helping the people who might otherwise be left behind in this change process. I believe that we owe it to ourselves as a species, as a community, as a society, to recognize that the harm and benefits are not equally distributed across society, and that if it's a net positive for society, we ought to make sure that no one is particularly left behind. So that is a public policy problem. That's not going to get solved using technology, but I would call that out. I would also say that we are so stuck on the idea of what makes us special. You all know the story of John Henry dying, trying to prove that he could drive spikes in on the railroads faster than a steam-driven pile driver. And he at least apocryphally won and then dropped dead on the spot. Because it was literally his definition of self, how strong he was. We're stuck in a similar definition of ourselves. And the tools are coming online that give us the opportunity to rise up to a higher plane of behavior and activity at work and in our personal lives. And that can be great, but let's not kid ourselves. It is for many people threatening their literal sense of self. And we're going to have to do heavy lifting emotionally, individually and as a society, in order to get to that higher plane, because many people just won't want to go there in the same reason that John Henry didn't.
If you could get a magic lamp and get a wish to change the term AI, artificial intelligence is pretty mainstream, change it to another word, augmented intelligence, what word would that be? And if you don't have anything, that's fine.
Well, I'm gonna change your question only very slightly. I think artificial intelligence is probably a fine term. I think artificial general intelligence and artificial super intelligence
Strong AI.
Yeah, and strong AI are also are super not helpful. And one of the many reasons that they're super not helpful is because they're not testable, and I'm big into like hypothesis testing. And if you know ahead of time you can't test a hypothesis, is a bad experiment to run. So I would propose instead that we be talking about liftoff, about a time at which computer programs can start making themselves better faster than we can make them better, because that is a very meaningful point for humanity, and it is a testable hypothesis. So that's a proposed vocabulary switch.
Great. What's it like being, like, I only know one other Astro, and that was from the Jetsons. What's it like being named Astro, and where'd the name come from?
It was a typo from Stanford. I was born Eric Teller in Cambridge, England. I grew up mostly in Evanston, just outside Chicago. And when I was applying to Stanford, this was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. There was actually still, you had to fill out paper to go to college. And my guidance counselor said, whatever you do, don't leave any blanks on the application. And at the top of the first page, so first line, first page, it said last name, first name, middle name, nickname. I don't have a middle name. So by the time I got to nickname, I had already failed. And so it wasn't fully made up. There were a few people on the soccer team who thought my flat top looked like I had a patch of AstroTurf on my head. And they didn't mean it in a nice way, but it was the only nickname I'd ever had, so I wrote down Astro. But whoever was keying it in at Stanford, I guess miskeyed it in because there wasn't a middle name, sort of confused the computer. So I ended up legally Astro Teller at Stanford, and they wouldn't even talk to me for months because I didn't have ID that said Astro on it. It was like this Kafka-esque situation. So
bureaucracy. All right. So let me throw a few concepts, at you, and you just react. Nano.
Small. I mean, yes.
Yeah. No, but what do you think? What do you know about that you think is interesting?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing that I thought of.
10 to the negative ninth. Nano.
Yes. We invest in tools at X, even when we aren't sure what they're going to be for. And we have a printer at X, which is called the Nanoscribe. And it can print something which is the voxels of which are about 300 nanometers on a side. So it's not a single nanometer, but that is unbelievably small little chunks. Microfluidics, specialized optics, I think there's going to be some things that it's profoundly useful for, but that's the first thing I thought of was our Nanoscribe when you mentioned that.
Oh, great. You're doing great. 5 stars if you're an Uber driver. All right. Biodiversity, climate, sustainability, those concepts.
We have a bunch. I refuse at X to predetermine what the moonshots are. I think it is a discovery process where we all think of crazy ideas and then we have to just go get evidence, and it's very surprising which ones turn out to be right. But there are a set of things I'm willing to treat as risk-free about the future. And one of the ones that's in the sort of roughly climate space, which I feel like people aren't watching as much as they might, is I believe the value of garbage is going to turn positive before 2040. So I think we haven't...
Garbage barge.
Garbage. Like, I think that the trash of Earth is going to be the oil wells of our future. Right. And not just the oil wells, but a lot of things.
So X, I don't know if you know, but it's been elevated, I feel like, in society. What does X mean to you? Why X, for your organization, and what can it mean to the people who are listening to this video?
Well, 15 years ago, so X is now 15 years old, and when we were started, there's aspiration was to be this sort of 21st century Bell Labs of sorts, and so we called ourselves Google X, put the X in brackets. So X was like 10X, like the number 10 in Roman numerals, but also X as in like the variable to be solved for, the unknown to go looking for. And then later when Google became Alphabet, or Alphabet became the holding company, Google was the main part of that, X moved from being part of Google to being a little sister to Google. And so we took the word Google off of our name, and then we were just X, the Moonshot Factory. our job didn't change, but we just became X in that sense.
You get Elon Musk's mail, or
Occasionally.
it's not a problem? Or?
No.
No. All right. Lastly, so the Moonshot Factory, like, are you like training other groups, other countries, other organizations to think like that? Like, you can't have all the responsibility to outthink the future so we can thrive as a species. How is what you're doing applicable to other groups?
I'm so glad you asked. Let me give you 2 quick answers to that. I mean, the first is that master class has just started doing certificate degrees, kind of like the nano degrees at Udacity and that sort of thing. And we agreed to be one of the first 4 that they're doing it with. And this was one of the ways in which we're trying to codify what we're doing so that other people can go do it, exactly to your point. It can't just be us. Another one, and we haven't solved this one yet, is people and companies, but even countries, approach us semi-regularly and say, we want to start our own Moonshot Factory. And routinely I say, great, I'm so happy to hear that. And there's like a long silence after that. And I haven't quite figured out what we should do after, in the middle of that long silence. We can't be responsible for setting all of them up, but we are interested in helping. And so that's sort of a to-do item for me over the next 5 years, is to be able to give much more satisfactory answer into that quiet spot.